Hi everyone, my name is Karen, this is my channel RatherBeReading, and today I'm bringing to you my November wrap up. November was kind of a weird month for me. I did read a decent amount, but I was also sick for a part of the month, which kind of lifted my numbers because I had a bit more time to read because I'd been unwell. Because there were quite a few books that took me a really long time to get through. I also, because I'd been sick and I had a lot going on, I didn't film and upload as many videos as I normally would, so I don't have a mid-month wrap-up. So I do have a bunch of books to talk about in this video, so I'm going to be trying to get through them as quickly as possible. If you do want more details, I will leave a link in the description box to all of the vlogs that I filmed in the month of November, where I do talk about the books in a bit more detail if you guys are interested in that. So I will try to go through them as quickly as possible, but we will, as always, start off with my reading statistics for the month. In the month of November, I read a total of 19 books. In addition to the 19, however, though, I did also DNF 2 other books. I read 17 novels and 2 graphic novels. I read 10 books in physical format. I read 1 ebook, and I listened to 8 audiobooks. Excluding the audiobooks, I read 7 books that I own and 4 from the library. I read a total of 6,711 pages, which averaged out to 224 pages per day, which I'm really happy with. The shortest book that I read were both of the graphic novels that I read were 112 pages, so those were the shortest, and the longest book that I read was 537 pages. The highest star rating that I gave was I actually gave 2 different books 5 stars this month, you guys, which is amazing. And the lowest star rating that I gave was I actually did give 3 different books 2.5 stars this month. So my average star rating averaged out to 3.32 stars, which isn't too bad. So those are the statistics. Now let's jump in and talk about all 19 books? Yeah, all of the 19 books that I need to talk about in this video that I did finish in the month. The first book that I completed in the month of November was Wool by Hugh Howey. This is one that I listened to on audio. It was narrated by Susanna Harker. This is an adult dystopian novel about a world where the air is no longer breathable, and so everyone lives in this kind of underground silo that's got hundreds and hundreds of levels, and that's kind of how society survives. I quite enjoyed this. I enjoyed the world, the setting in the silo I thought was pretty well developed and established. I really understood kind of how it all worked, and I thought it was done pretty evocatively as well, because there's a lot of talk about having to go up and down the levels of the silo, and I felt tired just thinking about climbing all those stairs because there ain't no elevators in this silo. I thought all of the characters were pretty well established, and in the end I did really quite enjoy it, and I gave it 3.75 stars. I then read Stormglass by Marie V. Schneider. This is the first book in the Glass trilogy, which is the second of 3 trilogies in the overall kind of Chronicles of Ixia novels. I enjoyed this. I didn't enjoy this quite as much as the original trilogy, but I thought that the author did a really good job of differentiating this main character from the main character that had been in that other trilogy. They're very, very different characters. I still enjoyed it. I don't enjoy the magic kind of that's involved in this one quite as much as the magic in the other one, but overall I did still really enjoy this, and I gave it 3.5 stars. Next, I read Peep Show by Lee Redhead. This is an Australian novel about a woman who wanted to be a police officer, however she got rejected, and so she is trying to train to become a private detective. However, she is also works as a kind of sex worker, as a stripper and things like that, and she basically goes undercover. It's my cat, everyone. Goes undercover in this strip club to try help solve a murder that her friend is being kind of accused of, and so she goes undercover. This was not that good. It was very obviously Australian. The writing is very Australian in my opinion, but the writing isn't really that great. All of the romantic elements are extremely toxic. Huge trigger warnings for drug use. So a lot of drug use going on in this book. And yeah, it was okay. It was really quick and easy to read, but definitely nothing amazing. In the end, I gave that 2.5 stars. I then read Giant Days Volume 7 by John Allison and a whole slew of other people. I really enjoyed this because I really enjoy this series. I love these characters. I love McGraw in particular. He's basically my #1 book boyfriend. I love him so much. And I enjoyed this volume just as much basically as I've enjoyed all the others, and I gave it 4 stars. Next, I actually DNF'd a book, and that was Love's Prey by Meg Zume X. This one is a YA romance that's basically about a 14-year-old girl who is from a really abusive family who forms a relationship with this 17-year-old boy who lives in her like apartment complex. I only read, how much of this did I read? Like 40 pages of like 250, so I didn't read very much of it. I think it was like 19%. Really didn't enjoy it. The writing was really not good. I also don't like a 14-year-old and a 17-year-old getting together. I have a problem with that age difference, and the portrayal of the main female character's like abusive like background I thought was really clunky and really poorly done, and I just really didn't like the writing, and I didn't want to waste my time on reading any more of it, so I DNF'd that one. I then listened to another audiobook, which was Damsel by Eleanor K. Arnold. This one was narrated by Elizabeth Knowlton. This one I had a really weird experience with reading. So this is a YA fantasy that's basically set in a world where every time a king dies, his son has to go on this journey to slay a dragon and rescue a damsel, and that damsel will then become his future queen. That's kind of what this book is about. So going in, as soon as I read the synopsis, I had a pretty good inkling of what was going to go down in this book. And then the whole book kind of leads up to this kind of twist moment, which again, I knew what it was going to be just from the synopsis. There are no likable male characters. There is a lot going on that I really hated. So the whole way along, this book was probably like a 2-star book. However, the ending was impeccable, and the ending was like, it kind of backtracked on everything that had come before that and showed why the author had put all of that into it. I still don't think this book is perfect. I still think it's got a lot of problems, but that ending made up for a lot. So originally it had been like a 2-star. I ended up giving it a 3.5 stars. That's how far, like, kind of coming up, the ending brought that rating. And like I said, in the end, I gave it 3.5 stars. A very interesting read. If you get through audiobooks really quickly, I recommend listening to it on audio, because I feel like if I'd read this in physical copy and it had taken me longer to get through, I may have DNF'd it because I really wasn't enjoying it. But because I listened to it in 2 days, I did keep going with it, and that's why I finished it and got to that amazing ending. So I do kind of recommend, if it's something that you can get through quite quickly, but maybe if you just know that there's a great payoff, you'll want to continue with it. I don't know, but the ending was amazing. Next, I listened on audio to The Dark Descent of Elizabeth Frankenstein by Kirsten White. This one is narrated on audio by Catherine McEwen. This one, I had, again, some kind of mixed opinions on. For me, this story, so this, if you don't know, is a YA historical fiction that follows Elizabeth, who is like Frankenstein's wife in the original Frankenstein, and we kind of go back and get her story kind of while everything in the Frankenstein story is going on. This for me really lacked atmosphere. That's one of my main problems with it. I also really didn't like the main character. I did like a lot of the commentary that it had in it on women and how hard it was for women at the time period that this is kind of set in that you had no control over your place in the world and what was going to happen to you, and all of it came down to men and all of that type of thing. I liked all of that commentary. It's also one of those books that has so many different endings. Like, the ending just kind of keeps going and then moves into a new ending and then a new ending. Parts of that I liked, parts of it I didn't, but the ultimate, there's a kind of tie-in, I'm not going to spoil, but there's a kind of tie-in right at the end to the original novel, which I really loved. So I had like mixed opinions on this one, but I did enjoy it for the most part. So in the end, I gave that 3.25 stars. I then read The Reversal by Michael Connolly. This is it is a Mickey Haller novel, but that falls into the Harry Bosch universe. This one is basically about a case where a man has been in jail for a little girl's murder for a really long time. However, the DNA evidence has come back that it doesn't support the conviction and it's been overturned, and Mickey Haller and Harry Bosch are trying to re-prosecute the case and have him put back in jail because they believe that he did commit this crime. and that's basically what it's about. I enjoyed this book for the most part. This was technically a reread. I had read it when I read the Mickey Haller series, but I really don't like the ending of this book, and that kind of really brought down the rating. I still enjoy it overall, but it's not my favorite by far in this series, and in the end I gave that one 3 stars. Next, I read Giant Days Extra Credit. So this is a kind of extra, it doesn't fall like sequentially or chronologically within the series. I believe that a couple of the parts in it are like little separate issue Christmas things that had been brought out. It's just basically a bind up of lots of like extra material. I didn't really like it that much. There were some of the kind of individual issues within it that I liked, but a lot of it I didn't really like. And because it's not part of the main series, a lot of the illustrations in it were done by different people, and so looked very different to how, like, canonically the illustrations have been done, and I really, really didn't love that. I still enjoyed it for the most part because I love these characters so much, but it definitely wasn't my favorite, and in the end I gave that 3.25 stars. I then listened on audio to An Unwanted Guest by Shari LaPena. This is a adult thriller, and it's basically about a group of people who are all staying at a hotel, a really like high class kind of hotel that they basically get snowed in. There's no electricity, no phones, and there's like 11 people all staying in this thing when one person dies, and everything kind of kicks off from there. I loved this book. I did listen to it on audio. It's narrated by Hilary Huber. I loved this book. It has buckets of atmosphere, this oppressive nature of being stuck in this hotel snowed in while people are dying, who's done it. You get kind of perspectives from all of the people at the hotel. I thought the perspectives were done really well, and all the like shifts between the different perspectives was done really, really well. I didn't give this 5 stars only because I wasn't shocked by the ending. I guessed like pretty much, I guessed it as much as I think you can guess it with what you're given. But there was nothing like overly in there that I was like, if I'd had that real moment, I probably would have given this a 5 stars, but I thought this was really, really well done, and I really, really enjoyed it, and it's definitely one of my favorite thrillers that I've ever read, and I gave it 4.5 stars. Next, I read Seaglass by Maria V. Schneider. This is the second book in the Glass trilogy. I enjoyed this one a little bit more than book 1. I like that Maria V. Schneider is pretty sex positive. She doesn't ever try to shame characters for, like, a lot of times in YA or this type of age range, you get the author sending a message that if you have sex with anyone who's not like your ultimate person who you're going to be with forever, that's a negative thing. Maria V. Schneider really doesn't do that, which I do really appreciate. I did really enjoy this. Like I said, I enjoyed it that little bit more than book 1, and so I gave this one 3.75 stars. I then listened on audio to The Lady's Guide to Petticoats and Piracy by Mackenzie Lee. This is the sequel to The Gentleman's Guide to Vice and Virtue. This one is narrated by Moira Quirk. I really enjoyed this. I think the overall kind of opinions about this book is that it doesn't live up to Gentleman's Guide to Vice and Virtue. I disagree. I liked this one just as much. I do think it gets off to a bit of a slow start, but it didn't bother me so much because I was already so invested in these characters because I'd read them in Gentleman's Guide to Vice and Virtue. I love Felicity. I love how feminist this is and how all the commentary on the different ways people can be feminist without it having to be... So the main character, for example, is very bookish and doesn't believe in silly feminine things, and she gets called out in the novel on just because someone does appreciate silly feminine things doesn't mean that they're not equally as strong of a woman and all of those types of things. I really liked all the commentary in there. The main character is asexual. You've got some female kind of things going on. There's some different race things going on in there as well. It's got great representation. I really, really, really enjoy it. It's just a very like fun, adventurous romp of a story, basically, just like Gentleman's Guide to Vice and Virtue was. I really enjoyed it, and I gave it 4.5 stars. Next, I listened on audio to Educated by Tara Westover. This one is narrated by Julia Whalen. It is a non-fiction memoir, and it's basically about Tara Westover, who grew up in a very devout Mormon family who were also survivalist. She grew up like... She doesn't have a birth certificate. She's never been to a hospital or a doctor in her entire life. She's never been to school. She had a very like different upbringing to the way most people are brought up. And it's just about her life and her kind of eventually moving to a place of being educated. I loved this book. I thought Tara Westover the writing is great. I thought that she did a really great job of being really unbiased in the novel, because a lot of times in memoirs, obviously you're getting the book from a particular person's perspective. It's their story, so it can feel a little bit like kind of biased to their point of view, and obviously that's always going to be the case, but she did a really great job of showing the different perspectives of things and saying, this is how I remember this happening and this is how it affected me. That doesn't mean that this is the only way that this could like be interpreted. I'm sure if you speak to this person, they see it from a different way. She's really honest about it in that way. I took so much out of this. I'd said that if I'd read this in physical copy, it may have been one of the first times I ever like highlighted passages. There were so many great messages in it and quotes and like passages that I just took so much out of. I just thought this was an amazing memoir. Definitely the best memoir I've ever read. Really, really, really enjoyed it. I gave it 5 stars. I then read Spyglass by Maria V. Schneider. This is the 3rd and final book in this trilogy. And I had some problems with this. The way ultimately that the love situation, the romantic situation ends up in this, I thought was super problematic. Problematic is a word that gets overused a lot, but I've got some issues with it, some real issues, and it really took away from everything else, because I actually think the plot and a lot of what was going on in this was probably my favorite of the 3, but the way that ended up, and the way that because of that some different characters were treated, I had a real problem with, and so in the end I could only give this a 3 star. Next I read Now You See Her by Heidi Perks. This is a book that I was approved for on NetGalley. This is an adult thriller that follows there's this woman and she's got her own 3 children. However, one day she's going to the school fete with her kids, and she also takes with her her best friend's daughter. And however, while they're at the school fete, her best friend's daughter goes missing. And it basically follows that story. You get the perspectives of both the mother who was with the children at the school fete and the mother of the little girl who went missing, trying to figure out what's happened, what's gone on, where is this little girl. This gets very positive ratings, or it has so far, so it seems to be pretty popular. I enjoyed it, but I don't think it was anything amazing. I thought that the twist that kind of is in there I predicted. I also find the story to be completely unbelievable, and like that's always can be a bit of a thing in thrillers, but I don't believe that anyone would do like what's done in this book. I'm just like, really? I liked that at the end it wasn't left in this place of like happy, 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 because I hate when that happens in thrillers because it's so unrealistic. So I like that the author didn't like go down that path. I mean, I did enjoy it overall. Like I always enjoy generally the ride with thrillers, but it just wasn't like anything super amazing for me, but I did still enjoy it. I gave it 3.5 stars. I then read The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern. So this is a magical realism type of novel, basically about a circus that appears without warning where, you know, it wasn't before, and that's basically all you really need to know. It kind of follows a magical competition between 2 people. It was amazing. The writing in this is so good. Like that is the main thing I took away from this. I couldn't get over how good this writing is. It was just amazing. The story is so whimsical and fantastical without ever moving into being like silly, which I think is a very fine line to tread, and the author did a great job of it. The main criticism I've seen of this, of people who didn't really like it, seems to be that they thought characters were underdeveloped. I strongly disagree with that, because I think the characters in this are so much a part of the world that the world is so rich that like the characters just kind of come along with that. Like it's hard to explain without you having read the book, but I thought this was amazing and I gave it 5 stars. Next I read The Wrath and the Dawn by Renee Ardier. This is a YA fantasy novel that's a retelling of 1001 Nights. So this follows a girl whose best friend was murdered at the hands of this king, who every day he takes a new bride, and by dawn the next day the bride is dead. And so the main character in this volunteers to be his next bride because she wants revenge for her best friend having been murdered at this king's hands. I had like high-ish hopes for this. I really hoped that I was going to love it. I didn't really like this. I enjoyed the writing and I thought the setting was really nice, but apart from that, I thought the magic in particular, super underdeveloped. There's a side kind of romance going on that I thought completely unnecessary. The main romance, super insta-lovey. There are like some stuff that happens at the end and like characters kind of villainized that I just thought was entirely unnecessary, and I just didn't really like this that much, and in the end I gave it 2.5 stars. Next, I listened on audio to The Bookshop of Yesterdays by Amy Meyerson. This one is narrated by Anne-Marie Gideon. So this is a kind of literary fiction that basically follows a girl who had an uncle who she really enjoyed, like when she was a little kid. He was like one of her favorite people, and he used to always create these like fun scavenger hunts for her. However, when she's about 12, her mum and her uncle have this massive fight and have a falling out, and she hasn't seen her uncle in like 15 years, something like that. Her uncle then dies and leaves to her his bookshop, and also along with that kind of one final kind of scavenger hunt that's ultimately her trying to discover what happened back then between her mum and her uncle and what caused the falling out. The only part of this book I really enjoyed was the scavenger hunt kind of parts of it. That I kind of enjoyed. The main thing I really struggled with was that I hated this main character. She is super selfish, super self-absorbed, and it wasn't the type of novel where you're supposed to not like the main character. I just had a real problem with her. I also found the book to be fairly predictable. There's also some cheating stuff in there that I really didn't enjoy. So in the end, I gave this 2.5 stars. Some parts that I kind of enjoyed, but for the most part, it really missed the mark for me. Next, we have the second book that I DNF'd for the month, and that is Touching Freedom by Surin Huckabee. This one I DNF'd about 40% of the way through. This is a YA/new adult novel about a guy and a girl who meet at an international youth meeting, and it's basically about their romance. I think it's what the synopsis leads you to believe, that a romance is going to form between them and that the girl has to kind of overcome his dark past in order for that kind of to happen. I really tried with this one. I pushed to 40%, but the writing again in this was just really, I didn't like. To me, it was very obvious that the writing was from someone who English wasn't their first language, and that's an assumption that I'm making, but not just the dialogue, but the writing just in general was very clunky. Like, I used an example when I talked about it in my vlog of at one point when the author is trying to say that something was very romantic and they said it was very romanticism, just things like that. And I'm not sure whether it's the writing or whether this was first published in another language and had been translated. I don't think that's the case because I couldn't find anything about it being a translation. But the writing I just didn't really enjoy, and then the overall story that was going on I just didn't really care about either. So then combined with the bad writing, I couldn't force myself to read any more of this, and I ended up DNFing it. I then listened on audio to a book called Reborn by CC Hunter. This is the first book in the Shadow Falls After Dark series, which is a spin-off series from the original Shadow Falls series. This is a YA paranormal novel that's set in a like boarding school / camp type of place that's for paranormal creatures. You've got werewolves, witches, vampires, shapeshifters, all of that type of thing going on. And we're following one of the side characters from the original trilogy. And it's funny, when I talked about this in my vlog, it's interesting how my reading tastes have obviously changed a little bit, because I gave every book in the first series at least a 4-star, and there are 5 books in that series, I believe. And I don't think that this book is that far off from those, and I didn't really love this one. It's very tropey, which I recognized when I read the first one that it was tropey. The first series, I mean. But it's very tropey. The love triangle that's kind of tried to put into this, super cringe. There's also just a lot of the language and like the way it's written. You know, it tries to be very like teen in that it's got characters like picking particular phrases and like in a joking way and then using those throughout the rest of the novel, but it just starts to grate on you so much because it's so repetitive and so annoying. So I don't know, I still will probably continue on with this. Like when I don't have any other audiobooks, I'll probably keep picking up the next ones in the series to just kind of see what ends up happening with it. But it's definitely nothing amazing, and I gave it 2.75 stars. And the final book that I read in the month of November was The Rose and the Dagger by Renee Ardier. This is the second and final book in this duology. I personally enjoyed this one a little bit more than the first book, which I understand is an unpopular opinion, but for me, I think the thing I liked a little bit more about this one was that I could kind of feel the feminist tone that I think the author was going for, and I could kind of feel it a little bit more in this, but the magic is so underdeveloped in this book. Like, it's It's so underdeveloped. All of the side characters are underdeveloped. There's also an event that kind of takes place near the end, which I won't spoil for you, but that the author kind of does that thing where she immediately hits rewind, and then that's kind of done for the purposes of like giving a character like a redemption, which I really just disagreed with. There's also a really unnecessary epilogue. Overall, I don't know, for me this series just really missed the mark, and in the end I gave this one 2.75 stars. So those are all of the books that I read in the month of November. I would love to chat with you guys in the comments down below if you've read any of the books that I read, if you've got any thoughts on them. Do you agree with me? Do you disagree? I would love to chat. I'd also like to know how your guys' November reading month went. I had 2 5-star books this month, which is amazing for me, so I'd love to know how your guys' month went. Please like this video if you liked it. Please subscribe if you want to see more of my channel. That is all I have for this video today. Bye guys!